It was April 1945. Show us your feet. The German women froze. This unexpected command was not part of the training or the dark warnings about being captured. At a British prisoner of war camp, the rain hammered on the tin roof of the processing tent like constant machine gun fire. Standing inside were 47 German auxiliary women, radio operators, clerks and nurses who had been captured just 3 days earlier during the final collapse. A young British Royal Army Medical Corps RAMC Corporal Davies repeated the instruction. Boots off, socks off, show us your feet. Before we dive deeper, every day we make videos like this, so be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new story. Back to the story. Elsa, a German auxiliary of 23, felt a surge of confusion mixed with fear. For 4 months, she had lived in the same pair of boots. She had prepared for the expected horrors of being captured, questions, perhaps violence, or certainly being made to feel worthless. But feet, this made no sense at all. What do they really want? She whispered to Helga next to her. Helga, only 19, had endured a 3-week non-stop walk from the collapsing Eastern Front before being captured. Her feet were in terrible pain, but she would not show she was weak. Yet Corporal Davis was not alone. Behind him stood other RAM medics with clipboards and medical bags. This looked less like a police interview and more like a health check. It is thought that around 15,000 German women auxiliaries were captured by the Western Allies in 1945. Almost none of them, maybe as few as 2%, could have ever predicted this strange, simple request. They had been taught to expect cruelty. The mud squelched as the first woman, Anna, 31, stepped forward. She was determined to go first to protect the younger women from whatever this strange check might be. She sat on a rough wooden bench and began to untie her boots. The leather was stiff with dried mud, sweat, and perhaps dried blood. She pulled. The boot fought back, having stuck fast with 4 months of moisture and wear. With a final horrible sucking sound, it came off. The smell was instant and powerful. Rotting leather, old sweat, and infected bad-smelling flesh. Anna peeled down her sock. It was stuck. She had to pull hard, and when it came free, it ripped a layer of her skin with it. The young British medic, Private Miller, barely 20, stepped forward. He knelt to look at the foot, took one look, and let out a sharp alarm sound, not of disgust, but of urgent medical worry. My God, get the sulfur powder immediately. The other women stared, totally confused. Why would the British care about the state of their enemies' feet? Why would they use expensive medicine on them? But Private Miller was already shouting for supplies, warm water, cloths and medicine to fight germs. Anna's feet were badly damaged. Elsa's were worse. The medic's voice translated for the group confirmed the problem. Trench foot so bad that the skin simply came away with the socks. The flesh underneath was black and grey in spots. Her toes were swollen to twice their normal size. When the medic gently touched the blackened area, Elsa felt nothing. The nerves were dead. How long has this been like this? The medic asked through the translator. Since January. 4 months. 4 months of constant walking in wet, dirty boots that were never taken off or dried. Trench foot had been a huge problem in German troops. I can't walk anymore, Elsa whispered, admitting total failure. The head medic called for a full medical team. They looked at the next woman, worse. The one after that, terrible. They quickly found that 90. The British medics then called for the truly unexpected. Get the sulfur powder, all of it, and warm water now. The British medical staff changed the tent into an emergency hospital. Tables appeared, supplies were piled up, and more people arrived. They were treating enemy feet as a serious medical crisis. Sulfur powder was the amazing medicine of the time, costing perhaps $25 per pound in 1945. The medics were pouring it onto the German women's feet. Why waste medicine on us? Anna asked the translator, watching them use supplies the German forces hadn't seen in years. New bandages, clean iodine, and even painkillers for the worst cases. Because you are patients now, the medic said clearly, not enemies, patients. They would use about $50 of sulfur powder that day, spending roughly $250 on German prisoners who just last week were working for the German Army Command. The warm water was the biggest shock. Most of the women had not washed their feet properly in months. The dirt, blood and filth disappeared, showing the true harm. Every bowl of water turned black right away. Elsa gasped as her feet were put in the water. The warmth hurt and felt wonderful at the same time. The medic was gentle, working carefully on the dead tissue, as if it might get better. "This might sting," he warned through the translator as he put on iodine. The iodine burned, but it was a clean, healing burn, very different from the silent rot that had been taking over her. They worked in quick, careful teams, one washing, one treating, one bandaging, giving each woman at least 20 minutes of good care. The British Major, Major Thompson, a medical officer, came to look at the scene. "How bad?" he asked. "The worst trench foot I've seen," was the reply. "We need more supplies. Get them," the Major said right away. There was no question of wasting supplies on enemies, only speed mattered. The reason for this speed was more than just kindness. Helga still stood, not wanting to take off her boots. The medic noticed. "You too." "Boots off," she shook her head. "I'm fine." That was not a request. Helga moved back slightly, unable to obey. The secret in her boots was much worse than just an infection. She finally sat, untying her boots with shaking hands. The boot came off and dried blood quickly stained the floor. As she pulled down her sock, it was more blood than cloth. Glass pieces of shattered window were still stuck in her foot. She had stepped through a destroyed shop window 3 weeks ago. There was no time to stop. The medic looked closely, counting at least 30 pieces of glass. "Were visible. Weeks," she confirmed. 300 meat on glass. Pain was my friend," she said simply. Pain meant she was still alive, still moving, still ahead of the Russian army. The medic called for tools. This needed to be cut out. Small tweezers, a small knife, and medicine to stop the pain if they had it. The medic started cutting out the glass. Each piece clinked into a metal pan. 1, 2, 5, 10. The pile grew. Helga did not move. 25 pieces. Some were deep and needed careful cutting to reach. The medic, Private Miller, sweating from the effort, worked to stop the bleeding, put on gauze, and pour on more sulfur powder. Then something happened that made Helga completely silent. The British medic cutting out the glass was crying. Real tears were running down his face as he worked. Helga noticed. She could not understand. Why would a British soldier cry for her German pain? "Why?" she whispered in simple English. "Why tears?" He looked up, his eyes red. The medic, Private Miller, told his story. His own sister had died in 1943 back home in England from a simple infection after stepping on a nail. No medicine available, went to the war effort, he said. She died from something we could have fixed. I promised I would never let infections kill anyone, enemy or not. That's why we check feet. Infection spreads, kills more than bullets. He cried for his enemy's pain, remembering his own loss. Helga whispered the German words to herself. She could not fully grasp it. The British Army required foot inspection twice daily, a hard lesson that greatly lowered injuries compared to the First World War. Being able to walk equals survival, Private Miller explained. You can't fight if you can't walk. Stopping infection prevents disease outbreaks. One untreated rotting foot could spread sickness throughout the whole camp, putting guards and prisoners at risk. This was the sensible reason behind the kindness. Private Miller finished his work. Helga's feet were carefully cleaned, wiped down, and wrapped in spotless white bandages. Bandages she had not seen in 2 years. Tea. Others stared in silence, unable to process what they had experienced. Elsa looked at her bandaged feet and quietly whispered to no one. Why? But she already knew. Because not everyone chooses cruelty, some choose to heal. The British soldiers packed up their medical equipment and prepared to move the German women to a safer holding area near a field hospital. The women were still enemies. They were still prisoners. But they were human beings. The British had recognized that, and that recognition changed everything for the German women. It did not erase their crimes or their suffering, but for the first time in months, they felt seen as human. Elsa looked back one more time at Lieutenant Smith, the British nurse who had washed her feet. She wanted to speak, but no words came. The nurse simply smiled and nodded. Then the march continued, through the mud, through the cold, but now with bandaged feet and a small spark of hope. A hope that kindness could still exist in the ruins of war.